Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, and it's a great pleasure to be here in Tokyo. It's the second time that I have a pleasure of representing Aleph Zero. Um, and without further ado, maybe let's just start. Today, I want to tell you a bit more about my journey in the context of Aleph Zero, in hopes of um, essentially sharing some entrepreneurial learnings that over the course of the last 7, 8 years have been with me on the journey. So um, for me, it all started in Krakow, in Poland. It's the second largest city in the country, and it was my co-founder's birthday. Very weird day for a variety of reasons, but one of them was that he caught me trading, I think, Litecoin on Revolut. And if you've ever used Revolut, you know that it has a very neat UX. And even back then, I wasn't trading profitably. I probably lost most of the stuff that I put in back then. But it was an interesting experience, and it was also a sort of a catalyst for us to start talking about crypto overall. And at that point, Adam was working on a consensus protocol of a new generation, and I was just finishing my adventure with a software house that we were building with a few friends. So essentially, after that birthday, we just started walking around the city and talking about the potential of building something out of that protocol. That was pretty much the beginning. At that point, we had, within a week, we had 4 people in the team. There are 4 co-founders of A0 right now. Originally, there were 6 of us even, but we kind of collectively agreed that it's a bit too much. So I'm currently the only non-technical co-founder, which might also be interesting because it's a heavily cryptographic product. And essentially, my role has always been to help set up operations, set up business, figure out how can we turn the technological innovation into something that can be applied more broadly. And this is, of course, something that was also a collective effort. And the first challenge that we've headed into is how do you define even what a user is in the context of a layer 1 chain, so the very base layer that you build dApps upon. And to this day, there is no answer beyond like a proof of personhood or some form of KYC maybe, because wallet activity does not count, so you have to kind of figure out a way around it, which makes the growth or marketing work that much harder. So you kind of rely on growing the community without really knowing who the end users end up being. And our idea initially was to just solve the core primitives that we thought were present in crypto at the time. So that was 2017, 2018. Let's say early Ethereum days, everything was slow. The UX was extremely cumbersome, and we also saw the need for privacy, on-chain privacy especially. And that was probably the first mistake we've made, which is that not that privacy is not important. We still think it's one of the most important things, but we were simply a bit too early with that approach. That being said, we pushed and pushed and pushed, and that was pretty much a project that was bootstrapped from the very beginning. So we used our own funds, we used friends and families' funds, whatever we could get our hands on, we just were putting into the product, and that was pretty much going on for 2 years. We developed a research paper. Well, we've written a research paper that was later peer-reviewed. We turned that into an MVP, and we launched a very fast testnet that kind of showed how quickly we can send transactions from one wallet to another. Still, we couldn't really define or find PMF at that point. Now, if we go a bit further, we were still relying on bootstrapping. COVID happened along the way, so that also kind of that didn't help in raising funds also. But by the end of that year, we saw the market sort of shifting its course a bit. So around that time, we already had a team of a few very, very talented people. And we are thankful to them for this day for sticking around, because it wasn't the most glorious environment to work with. If you've built your own startup, then you probably know what I'm talking about, which is you kind of have a room or some co-working office, and you basically fight every month or every quarter to keep the lights on. Now, why we started all this, maybe before we kind of get into the fundraising process and maybe the launching process also, is because blockchains, for me personally, have been a tool for digital democracies. And even though they start as plutocracies due to the token economies, ultimately they are freedom tools pretty much. And the versatility of them goes way beyond finance, which is one of the main topics of GTFN, but you can also tokenize art, tokenize real estate, and all of this back in 2017, 2018 was extremely appealing to all of us, sort of these pretty much unlimited possibilities. But again, we've made the same mistake of thinking that all this stuff is going to happen sooner rather than later, and fast forward to 2025, and we're still looking for, as an industry, for an optimal way to tokenize art, for instance. Nevertheless, it's still the core value proposition remains the same. So you kind of build a technology that enables proper value transfer between two individuals that is way more inclusive than the solutions that, the legacy solutions that have already been on the market, and that's what originally drew us to developing Aleph 0. Yeah, and the core USP that we had in mind was privacy. So how do you enable private transactions, private smart contracts? How do you make RWAs shielded? How do you make the data more protected? And none of the infrastructure networks that we saw at the time, except for Monero, for instance, but vast majority of the networks were not building something that can be called programmable privacy. And we wanted to solve that by developing an entirely new ecosystem, because the problem with privacy in blockchain or on-chain is that you cannot just plug it in or add it, because it's just technologically too complex. And based on that concept, we were able to raise $15 million. That allowed us to then build out a team, develop the mainnet, launch it, help fund more applications to build on top of the network. The primary challenge that we were facing as we were going along, and as the valuation was growing and the expectations were growing, was that we didn't account for how difficult is it going to get to integrate an exotic tech stack into the broader crypto space. So all the exchanges, all the protocols, custodians, all of this was becoming more and more difficult to integrate because of the lack of compatibility between our own tech stack, which wasn't a standard back then and still isn't, compared to something like EVM, for instance. So that led us to then pivoting a bit. We pivoted from the way we're delivering the value proposition, but not from the value proposition itself. So it's a quite interesting, I think, concept when where you still do the same stuff, but in a somewhat different way. So right now, instead of focusing most of our efforts on the very base infrastructure layer, we simply go where the users already are, which is we deploy something called a shielder network onto very different chains, and then build a sort of a front end for all the users to be able to benefit from privacy. And this is going live pretty soon. The realization that this is the route that we need to go has been quite painful for all of us, also given the work that we've put into building the base layer. But nonetheless, you know, you can boil it down to one of the probably simplest mistakes that one can do, which is distribution is king. But then again, when you're really in the early days of a developing industry, you don't really know where the distribution is going to go. So you don't know which standard is going to win. You're betting on different standards. And that's probably the most challenging part. Nevertheless, right now we're going full speed with battle scars, with pretty much the same people, the same community, awesome partners, and couldn't be more excited of where it takes us. Thank you so much.